This person here is a woman. First glance, and for a few second or so, you might be a bit confused because this woman appears to have a slightly heavier forehead than your average woman, a slightly heavier jaw, and there's definitely some ghost of a beard there. And the reason for that is because this woman, when a girl, fell into the clutches of the Tavistock Clinic. I'm going to be talking about that. I'm Graniopteryx. Her name is Keira Bell. And she says, every time I look in the mirror, it's a reminder of what happened at the Tavistock. Now, if you look at Keira, she obviously fell into the Tavistock because she thought when in her early teens, she didn't know whether she was a boy or a girl. Looking at her, she appears to be of some sort of mixed race. And my suspicion is she was more confused about her race than her sex. I think that was probably one of the things that might have impelled her to go down this route. And of course, any teenager is confused anyway, so there are layers on layers here, aren't there? The Cass report, the Cass review, is a moment that adds feeling, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. She's now 27 and one of the most prominent former patients of the Tavistock Gender Clinic, as a result of her determination to expose the trauma she experienced at the centre as a teenager. Now, I've been talking about this in other videos, and I've seen comments underneath about the doctors and the parents. There's also the politics. The politics was something to do with it as well. Anyway, let's start with this. I suppose we should all be celebrating the demise of this trans mania. But I, for one, I can't do that because too much damage has been done. All you've got to do is look at poor Miss Bell to see that. There's all the pain and suffering of confused children and their lives wrecked and the agonies of bullied parents. You see, we say, why are the parents allowing this to happen? Well, they have doctors in front of them saying that their child would kill himself or herself if they didn't transition. And the standard question was, for instance, if you had a boy who said he was wanted to be a girl, and the doctor would say, well, look, do you want a dead son or a live daughter? And that's how parents, confused and worried, and probably their kids were giving them a hard time as well, not knowing where to turn. And the people to whom they were supposed to turn, the medical authorities, were the very people who were pushing them in this direction. And even though the government is putting a stop to this sort of, well, at least some of this problem, there's a generation now of transition children, just like Keira Bell, who will be growing up into sterile adults and then aging into older people with no children and likely no families. The only good thing about all of this is that corrupt organisations like Stonewall and Mermaids are starting to develop a patina of grime that they richly deserve. However, I expect those... Just a minute, I'm going to cough. I expect those organisations will stagger on with the same goals and philosophies because it's just too embarrassing and possibly costly to change them. And they could end up, if they admit that they were wrong or bullying or even malicious, then they could get sued as well. The same goes for the teachers' unions, because there's nothing quite so protective of their socialist groupthink as a bunch of teachers. And I made a video recently in which I pointed out that teachers are going to allow children to pretend they're whichever sex they want without telling their parents. This, as the Cass report is coming out, teachers are going in diametrically the opposite direction. Now, as for the politicians, well, politicians change their minds like Meghan Markle changes shoes. Boris Johnson was head over heels in love with the idea a little while ago. Penny Mordaunt, famously, you know, the sword bearer at the coronation of King Charles, she made a famous declaration in the House of Commons: trans men are men and trans women are women, she said, and not a soul in the entire House raised an objection. Nobody stood up there to object. Meanwhile, the machinery of government was set up to stop people misgendering. And encouraged by our politicians, the civil service have been doing workshops on gender identity. It's like a sort of mania, like that dancing mania in the 14th century. But now it's all changed. Here, there's an article Johnson wrote for The Telegraph supporting J.K. Rowling and telling us that, get this, Rowling, I'll find a clip of it. I don't have it with me right now. Rowling was saying what most people secretly think about gender. What? So all the time he was being a prime minister, he was secretly thinking that it was all wrong while telling people that it was all right. I'll tell you what, he said everybody was secretly thinking. I'll bet you most of the people watching this video didn't secretly think that. And Johnson is saying he knew it was hokum and went along with it anyway. Well, that's what it looks like. And he was supposed to be leading the country on a lie. As for the Labour Party, suddenly the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, is saying she thinks children were badly let down. Just to be clear, a couple of years back, when some reporter asked Yvette Cooper what a woman was, she said something like, "Oh, no, I'm not going down that rabbit hole." She's okay speaking out now, though, and the MPs who, like us, weren't secretly thinking, like the Labour MP Rosie Duffield and the Conservative MP Miriam Kate, they went through hell. They lost friends and colleagues, and they're still ignored to this day, because they're troublemakers, of course. These women have been bullied, ostracised and made fun of, and even threatened for years, not only by their so-called colleagues, but by the mainstream media outlets such as the BBC, who were constantly having a go at them for being behind the times. And I remember one particular incident where a Labour MP called Lloyd Russell Mole, who made a speech haranguing Kate over her opposition on the proposed Scottish gender legislation.
Goodness me, that speech was probably one of the worst transphobic dog whistle speeches that I've heard in an awful long time. The idea of linking trans people with predators, frankly, is disgusting, and you should be ashamed.
Mercifully was stopped by Rishi Sunak. It's one of the few things he actually got right. And that same Russell Moyle actually got out of his seat during a Commons debate, and he was on the Labour benches, and he went to sit in a pew right next to Coates, staring at her the whole time. And You'll probably be able to find that on the internet if you want to look at it. It was a disgraceful example. And Rosie Duffield got a whole gang of Labour colleagues shouting her down during a debate. And even the more high-profile Kemi Badenoch has come under pressure from on high regarding her trenchant defence of women's rights to privacy and protection. And then there's Keir Starmer. You know, I'll find that video as well. He was asked, I've played it a couple of times. He was asked if women have a cervix, and he said something like, "Oh, you can't ask questions like that. You shouldn't say things like that." That's Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. But Andrew,
it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. But Andrew, I don't think that...
So Rosie Duffield should not have said that.
You can help my channel by clicking like, by subscribing, by clicking the notification bell, and by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels are in the description, also links to donation sites, but really the best way you can help me is simply by clicking like. Thank you. And there are others as well. Emily Thornberry wouldn't say whether or not a woman with an optional extra is really a woman, or perhaps a man in a frock. They were all in on the bandwagon. And now the bandwagon has reached its terminus. Suddenly, they're all strangely quiet or dashing about like Boris Johnson looking to catch a bus going in the opposite direction. Meanwhile, children's lives have been ruined, like Miss Bell's. People have lost jobs. Teachers are dragging on, still teaching rubbish, and the ones who won't do that are losing their jobs. And we're all standing round wondering what's happened to politics. No, there's too much pain being spread around by this awful idea for me even to think about celebrating as it dies. And Keira Bell, well, I don't know what sort of a life she's going to be living. For people like me who've been involved as whistleblowers, this isn't news, obviously, Bell says. There's much more to be revealed, but the Cass review is a start. So, well, there we are. It's just look at this woman here. This poor girl. This poor girl. And she's going to live the rest of her life with this. And a lot of politicians just sort of change their minds and move on. She can't. And she's only one. God curse Stonewall. God curse them. Till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share, share, share.